So Carsten, Federico, Simon, Marie, you are very, very welcome. Great to see you. Thank you for tuning in tonight.
Thanks for inviting.
Are you all in the
really
UK?
Good session. Really
Thank
good
you
session.
so much. Everybody in the UK, or are we spread out?
No.
Yeah. I'm in the UK.
Thank you very much for the invitation, Richard and Odilia. I am in Italy.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, good. Marie, were you saying yes, you're in the UK, or yes, you're not in the UK?
No, I'm no longer in the UK. I moved to France, and there is no way for me to go back to the UK because it's on the red list. So.
Oh, no. Oh, you're in our sister country. France and England famously always got on, of course, over the years. Well, so we've organized this special briefing, this rapid response, we're calling it. And thank you so much, because each of you responded super quickly to say, yes, you'd come and have this conversation. So this is an open dialogue. We're going to go for 1 hour and the next 57 minutes, because this is just too fascinating not to dive into straight away. Let me do a quick set of bios for everybody. And then, Federico, I'm going to come to you and just give us a bit more context about why we've organized this session and the triggers for this. So Simon, let me start by introducing you. You are the Information Governance Manager for Revia Health, working with healthcare organizations to accelerate the trajectory of mental health research. Previously, the DPO, Data Protection Officer for the Orders of St. John Care Trust, a not-for-profit charity with around 70 care homes. You are very welcome.
Good to be here, thank you.
Absolutely. Federico, lawyer, PhD candidate, providing data protection consultancy services for Qubit Privacy currently. He's the author of Data Protection Law in Charts, a visual guide to the general data protection regulation. Federico, thank you for coming. And Odilia, thank you for inviting Federico as well.
Thank you very much for the invitation again. And hello, everyone.
Very, very welcome.
Thank you.
Marie is here, Senior Legal Counsel, specialized in intellectual property and data protection. She handles all legal aspects of R&D projects, from technology development to licensing and litigation. She started by dealing with GDPR when working on health projects for a top UK university. Welcome, Marie.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. And yes, dealing with GDPR on health at the time of Brexit in the UK was a mess.
Still is.
Brilliant.
For sure. And then Carsten, shout out for Milton Keynes, of course. Carsten,
Well, yeah.
I had to invite you the minute we had this topic on our hands. So he's been working in the UK as the EU settled status, leading and executing end-to-end service delivery for local, pan-European and global clients. Across industries, manufacturing, financial services, telco, energy, retail, transport, health, government, you name it. He's there. He delivers hands-on data protection management, DPO as a service, actively supporting clients in, of course, GDPR compliance, and the end-to-end hands-on business analysis, compliant audits, gap analysis, risk management, management of change, and continuous process improvements. You are all very welcome, and welcome, Carsten.
Thank you very much, Richard, and thank you for the speakers before us here. It was amazing. This whole thing was brilliant. It really was unbelievable.
Oh, thanks.
if I could just put something into the chat.
Into the chat? Yeah.
There is a link. There's a link to the Churchill Society. Okay. And I don't want to drag out old stuff, yeah, but Churchill actually made a wonderful speech back in the day in 1947 after the war. And basically one of the quotes from here that really resonate with me, and that is, our powers are limited, but we know and we must affirm what we mean and what we want. So if we go down that route, and really state what we want out of this, then I think the change will happen. Yeah? And for me, it is really, really important that we make the change, and change is really individual. Yeah? So when we talk about big corporations and big government and all of that, if you really boil it down to something, they are all made up of people. Every organization is made up of persons, one way or the other. So therefore, the change that we need to affect, we need to look into the mirror and affect ourselves, the change on ourselves. And I think that is what Rose meant in the part as well, and then give access to that change to other people and become an agent for change going on. I think that would be really, really important. Yeah, irrespective of GDPR or AI, it is, the human touch of change is really important here.
They're just stories and ideas at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But let's not go down a no Harari just at the moment. Carsten, thank you so much for that. And a wonderful way to open this session as well. I'm going to add Odilia to the spotlight because she's going to moderate this session and give me a rest for a little bit as well. Federico, what's going on? What's the story here? Set the scene for us about this report and what's happening.
Well, just to start, I think that this week and the week before, we have a lot of fresh information from the UK and Europe. First of all, because the European Commission has released it hasn't released, but it was leaked and it was announced that the adequacy decision for the UK was released. I haven't seen it, but well, it was announced that it is, so we have to try. We have to trust that it is. But at the same time, it was released the UK Task for Innovation, Growth and Regulatory Reform report, which is the Tiger for short report, which is a report. The report was made by 3 Tory politicians who recommended. They made a lot of recommendations. It is a 130 pages report, but the part concerning GDPR or data protection, it is only 3-4 pages long. So it will be a very, very short introduction just to trigger the discussion, to kick off the discussion. So they basically propose to replace the GDPR with a new UK framework of citizen data rights. They claim that this framework will give the UK citizens more control over their data and will boost free flow of information. But well, what are the 2 main suggestions or the 2 main proposals that they make? First of all, they say that they will give more and meaningful control to data subjects over their data, and they plan to boost artificial intelligence by removing or suggesting to remove Article 22 of the GDPR. Then I will explain very briefly what it means. So what it means, giving more control to people. They first of all, they reference a report in which they say that, well, we all know that data, even though we try to avoid this word of that the data is a commodity, we all know that big companies, big data companies treat data as a commodity. Data is new oil is a phrase that we all are used to listen. But well, they reference a report in which they say that an email address of a single internet user is worth $89.
Or something like that.
89. Well, $1998. It is much more or less the same. And the total data of an average US resident is about $2,000 and $3,000. So they make an analysis. They reference a study in which they claim these are the numbers. It is very difficult to know, but well, in a nutshell, they consider that the GDPR is prescriptive, inflexible, and particularly onerous for SME, which it is
true in the healthcare.
It is true. Every law is prescriptive. I can imagine any law not being prescriptive. After all, if it is a law, it must be prescriptive. Otherwise, it would be a guideline, a suggestion, a recommendation, or whatever, but not a law. So it is prescriptive. But it is true that for small companies, it can be burdensome. Then we can discuss this statement. They claim that this new framework will give more control over their data, and they allow the resale of their data. It is true that it may be a tempting idea to give more control to citizens over their data and even allowing the sale. But well, we have to remember that we are talking about fundamental rights. Fundamental rights are by definition not tradable. We cannot trade with fundamental rights. Even though fundamental rights can be limited in many situations, but we cannot trade fundamental rights. I cannot trade my freedom. I cannot trade certain fundamental rights that I have. So I am skeptical of the solution, but there are many suggestions on this regard. Then, concerning consent, they mentioned that consent is one of the most important legal basis to process personal data. I can say that, well, consent. It is not about cookies. Cookies are not about GDPR. They mention cookies, but they are not GDPR. We can skip this. I can avoid criticizing them for this misunderstanding. But well, cookies are about PICAR, not GDPR. And it's true. It is true that they mentioned that cookie is an automatic tick box operation, and the cookie banners often causes not only information fatigue, but also it is really annoying. It is true, but the solution. I remember a post that made by Robert Bateman, which I fully agree. He says that, well, the solution is not wipe out the GDPR. The solution is enforcing it. So, or PICAR, no GDPR, GDPR and PICAR. So then they mentioned data trust. I am not going to give an opinion on data trust because I am not an expert. I barely know the idea of data trust. So
there are a few in France. The Health Data Hub for health projects. So they are a repository of health data. They stock them in a specific way and they give you specific authorization. But I think the data, they have specific security and anonymization requirements with respect to the data.
Yeah, yes. Well, that's why I will leave this part of data trust to you, because I'm honestly I have to read a bit more on data trust. But well,
we do have a couple in the UK as well.
Yes, and I think that there are also in Canada or in the US, but well, I'm not sure. And finally, one of the most concerning suggestions that they make is about removing Article 22 concerning automated decision making. They claim that Article 22 limits the development of AI systems. So they propose either the removal of Article 32 or at least remove the human review of decision. We know that the automatic decision making is heavily regulated on the GDPR in Article 22, and one of the requirements for automated decision making to be allowed is to have a human on the loop, so and a natural person can review the decision, can take a decision against, or decide not to take a decision based on the system. And I think that this is a really important safeguard for data subjects. And in this report, one of the most striking suggestions is to remove it altogether. So, well, I think as we work on data protection, we must be, at least this is my impression, I am a bit not concerned, but yes, surprised for these bold claims and for these recommendations. So I am all ears. I would like to listen also your opinions on this particular subject.
That's the first part, because they have a draft data strategy for health.
So thank you so much for this.
Sorry.
Thank you so much for this wonderful summary. You touched a lot of interesting points. So I see that we look forward to discuss with you. And so speaking about, for example, control over data and consent, we see that there is an asymmetry in the information that users has. And what does it mean, for example, to have an alternative to this tick box? So what could be an alternative to this? Mary, you would like to comment on this?
No, in fact, I was just thinking that for me, I'm a patient and I have worked in health research, and consent or ticking all those boxes, sometimes it's too burdensome and it takes too much time. So, for example, when I'm thinking about health, there should be an exception or a legal basis for public health research. And you wouldn't need any consent, you would still need security, you would still need some transparency on your research, but that's it. It shouldn't be more burdensome than that.
Can I come in on that point, Marie? Because I think, you know, in the UK, we've got that. We would put it under the exercise of public authority laid out in law. And what we've seen for those in the UK, we've seen the NHS Digital, which is our kind of information collection part of the NHS. Because, you know, we just love putting NHS and then something out of it. But they have failed spectacularly in using GP data for planning of research by completely failing to tell people about how to do it. And I think in terms of the tick boxes, I don't think actually necessarily it's so onerous, but I think those of us working in data protection and working in health research need to be far, far better at communicating that in ways that people can understand. But there is an absolute holy grail, I think, in terms of finding something that is giving people enough information to be sufficiently informed, whilst not kind of giving them, oh yes, and then we're going to take this data in a test tube and prepare, and just, you know, going stage by stage ad infinitum. I think there's kind of two levels of providing information. One is that here's the bare basics, and if you want to know more, we can give you more. But that does take time, and that's the tricky part.
I mean, we did say earlier that we won't really want to talk about cookies, yeah, but if that is the perception of the general public of that is GDPR, cookies is not GDPR at all. Cookies is about here's my machine, whatever, my phone, yeah, and I allow you to put something onto it. That is what a cookie is, right? And my consent around this. GDPR is all about making sure that my personal data is safeguarded, number one, and number two, when I have given it away, or whether there may be other additional legal basis for a processor to process my data, not just consent. Yeah, consent is just one of 6. That then can move the data across the European landscape. That is the second objective of GDPR. And so safeguarding is one, and free movement of data is the other. Okay, and in order to achieve both, what we really have to do and look at are the combination of technical and organizational measures that help us to protect the individual, to protect the data. Yeah, and me being German, and really, I don't want to drag in the Second World War, particularly not before Tuesday anyway. My grandmother was 23, I think, when the Second World War started, 23, and she just had my father, given birth to my father, and went through that horrible, horrible time. Yeah, and that time was also inflicting constraints onto every individual, and they were taking data that they were spying on. That state was spying on the individuals, and that is one of the drivers why Europe said, we don't want this anymore. And in fact, you can read it up in the link that I sent. Even Mr. Churchill said it's a good idea to protect the individual. Okay, so what we now see is a political landscape which we can't really divorce from these discussions, where people want to take our data, my data, and want to make money out of it. Now, I don't blame them for making money out of it, but I want to be in control of my data. I want to be data sovereign. And I think Timmy said something very similar earlier today. So data sovereignty is really important subject as well to take. So when I look at all of this, ticking the boxes is not GDPR. Making sure that my data is secure is another. And when we now apply this security, what are the measures that we can take? So really, what is it that even a small and medium enterprise can do? They can encrypt the data. Yeah? And suddenly, even though it is still personal data, but it is no longer readily usable. It is not in clear format. Yeah? So we have to get to a point where data in clear is something of an anomaly, yeah, and everything should be. I'm in the camp that says, why don't you encrypt it? Yeah, that way you transport it, and when you transport the data subject rights and the data privacy rights, they follow the data as well from everywhere in the world. And so this whole thing is multifaceted. Yeah,
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
In a hospital, it's all about your personal data, and I don't see why I should pseudonymize or anonymize my data, because I need a doctor, whoever he is, have full access to my report. But my hospital is asking me to pseudonymize my data. I find this is nonsense. Sorry, but they need my data, and any doctor who has my name and my surname and my date of birth should access my data, because all my medical data are relevant to any doctor. And this is where I have a problem when people use GDPR to protect my data, to make sure that an external company or hacker or whatever cannot access them, steal them, and put them publicly on internet. But that stops here. It shouldn't go further.
Yes, I agree, and violently with you, Marie. So if I need hospital treatment, I'm quite happy to give up my data subject rights to that extent, and so even to the point where I say in the pandemic, yeah, when we need to collect big data in order to make a better vaccine or whatever, absolutely fine to give it up, yeah, but it has to be in a controlled fashion. And I think the fear that I have is that when we hand over the data into this new big NHS storage, you know, and Simon said that just put NHS in front of it and everybody will sign up to it. Yeah. What I would like to see as an individual is, so what is going to happen to that data? Where is it going? Is it going to the States? And what are they going to do with that data outside of my hospital treatment? Yeah.
They didn't specify that in the draft.
Exactly. And that's
strategy.
the point.
They said two things. They said that there should be specific power to the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care to have access to those data for public. I don't remember.
Public interest.
Support healthcare system. But does that mean, for example, that foreigners will have to pay more just because they are foreigners, you know? Because we, for example, see that foreigners have more commonly, they're more expensive or this kind of thing. This is what I was scared about. And the second thing is that they wanted to force the agencies to share the data with other agencies, but you don't really know what will happen with those data. And you don't really know for which public health and social care research they will be used.
Thank you so much, Mary. So Simon would like to comment on this.
Yeah, so I don't know if everyone else picked this up in the Tigger report. I'm going to call it Tigger because then I can make all sorts of Winnie the Pooh references. But in the report, one of the things that struck me a lot is that I think the word individuals is used about maybe 2 or 3 times, data subjects a couple of times, citizens and consumers, it's just the rest of it. And that worries me for a couple of reasons. One, it starts entering into kind of more US style language where you rate people's rights based on their wealth or what they're consuming. You kind of break them down to just simple economic pawns rather than people. But actually the second point, which is one which I'm very sorry to say is becoming, I think, increasingly more prevalent in the UK political circles, which is around delineating British people and others. And that's really disturbing because particularly, you know, Britain has a mixed legacy when it comes to human rights. I mean, slave trade, concentration camps, it's not a very proud history. But actually, in the last kind of 50, 60 years or so, when we've had people like David Maxwell-Fyfe, who was the deputy prosecutor at Nuremberg, sorry, we brought the Second World War back again, and then went on to be one of the midwives to the European Convention on Human Rights. And it kind of feels like we're kind of pooing on our own heritage as a country. And it's quite disturbing, because once you start to dehumanize people, well, we know historically where that goes. And it means we can do things like separate children from their parents at the border and put them in cages. You know, and Lord Wilson, one of the previous justices on the Supreme Court, said in an audience in America, this practice of people separating children and their parents at the border wouldn't happen very easily in Europe, because we've got the European Convention on Human Rights and the rights to a private and family life. Correct. And so I'm really disturbed by all of this in terms of that part. But I think we need to get away from the commodification of data in the way that distracts it from the individual, because you can't divorce those two things. I think if we, you know, data isn't so much the new oil, because it's dependent on people. It's, you know, when we start commoditizing people, there is a name for that. I think it's closer to that than it is to commoditizing a raw material. I think the last thing I want to say very quickly was, did anyone else start to kind of feel the data protection community go into collective apoplexy as they read some of the incredibly basic legal inaccuracies and errors within this report? Things like, you know, consent is the main legal basis. Is it? Is it?
It's the one most people use, because, you know, when I was doing research contract for health project, I was thinking I could use contract or legitimate interest or potential, not public health, for getting the data, especially data that were collected 10 years ago and that there was no GDPR this time. And my boss was like, no way, we have to use consent. I was like, why? I mean, why do you always need to use consent, especially for research project during COVID, on COVID, for public health benefits?
Do you think there might be some kind of I think, Federico, I think you're being far too forgiving of British politicians. And, you know, for someone who has been legislating almost as long as I've been alive, I kind of expect him to have opened the GDPR and read it. But based on this report, he clearly hasn't.
I truly agree with you, and I would also build on Carsten's comments when he mentioned that GDPR is about free flow of data and protecting fundamental rights in general, in particular data protection. We have to remember that also Article 22 is about protecting human dignity and avoid that persons are reduced to things, and that have a person monitoring the functioning and the outputs of AI systems. So it is quite concerning for British people if this report gets more attention, and of course, well, and we will know we don't know what will happen with the adequacy decision. This is totally another chapter if this report continues with the legislative procedure.
The adequacy decision is time limited anyway, so, and I assume they can review it if things change in the UK.
Yeah, of course, it can be also invalidated, but well.
By the Court of Justice. Yeah. Let's go for another.
Strength 3.
Yeah. And you mentioned also Article 5, Federico. So that it states that data, the purpose of why data are collected should be clear, isn't it?
Yes, of course. One of the principles of data protection is, among others, purpose limitation. Purposes must be established prior to start collecting data, and they must be clear, well, very detailed. So in this report, there are so many confusing things in this report. So and in this aspect, they mention consent as the main basis of for processing data.
Yeah, I was wondering how this could be applied also to data that are concern your biometrics, or that some data that could be inferred from other one. So it's very complicated.
Yes, indeed. But these kind of things, there wasn't the report don't go very deep on this issue. They only mentioned that they plan to change the scope or core of the GDPR, making this instead of the system like it is, they're making it more user-centric, and that the user regain control of the data and be able to resell it. But well, I am a bit skeptical of this kind of mechanisms, but I am not sure how it works in other jurisdictions, in particular the data trusts.
Who want to comment on this?
Yeah, for me, we already have a GDPR. The UK GDPR is a straight copy from the European GDPR, so it's already there. We should be, in my view, we should be using what we have, apply what we have, and absolutely make changes, yeah, but not so drastic that you throw it away and start something new, because that will actually confuse the situation, in my personal view. Now, I'm in the camp where I say, well, keep the GDPR, in particularly keep Article 22. I'm fully with you there, Federico. I don't want that to be thrown away, because that in the context of AI, that gives me as the individual a mechanism to have somebody else, a real human being, to check over an automatic decision that was taken with my data, probably combined with something else, and something else again on top, and then led to an outcome which I don't understand or particularly don't like, or perhaps through bias in the data, gave an unfavorable decision on me. Yeah. So it may lead, I mean, in the worst case, I may not get a job, because my application says something that the AI might not like, or the AI data that feeds might not like. So that has really significant impacts on an individual. So in that case, I really want somebody to say, can I just ask a question, and how did you arrive at this particular decision and why? Yeah. It may not overturn the decision, but at least I have a regress of some result that I can use as an individual. And if you take that away, then you basically chain me to the AI, which I don't think is right. It's not even ethical.
I think you end up in a legal position where, what's one of the main issues that Privacy Shield went down is a complete lack of redress. If decisions are made about you with no redress, you're in a kind of Kafkaesque sort of novel.
Yes, you're right, and we have to take into account that Article 22 gives people redress, or gives people the right to challenge decision, even if the decision would have been taken by a human being, you would not have the right to challenge it. So I think that it is a core right for data subjects, because it is special in this sense. If the same decision would have been taken by a human being, you will not have the right to contest the decision. And apart from that, not only Article 22 would have to be erased. You have to erase also the rights to information in Article 13 and 14, which gives you the opportunity to know which are the envisaged consequences of the processing with Article 22, and also the ability to know what are the logics behind the decision. So, and this is very important for many people, even though we may not understand what are the inner workings of an AI system. I have to be honest, I don't know, I don't understand. If someone explained me the system, how the system works in a very technical way, I won't understand it. But at least I will have the right to know the bare minimum, I have the right to get the bare minimum information in order to get something to contest the decision to see, well, how can I improve in the following chance that I apply for this job, that I request this social benefit. So if Article 22 is erased, I won't have this right anymore. So I think that this is very important.
Absolutely, and we see here that we have the topic of the AI explainability that became crucial, because otherwise we cannot have the interrogability of the conclusion that we have. So I think on this topic, I would like to hear from Carsten, because you are a very great expert of GDPR, and would like to know how, for example, this could be applied with, for example, the federate learning court that we have, the most recent development on the data collection.
Okay, so my view on data collections, big data collections, is actually quite simple. There are items on a transactional basis where I want to give my data away and I get something, a service in return. Okay, not a problem with that. When it comes to go beyond that purpose, yeah, so a processing for a different purpose beyond that transaction that I just mentioned, yeah, then I think pseudonymization of data, encryption of data, making sure that we divorce the personal, the private aspect from the data, yeah, that will actually then give the artificial intelligence the data that they need. Yeah, the AI doesn't necessarily need to know everything about me. It just needs to know that something happened, whether it was me or you or somebody else, should be of secondary concern, really. Yeah. So when I think about AI mechanisms and algorithms, I really encourage every person who designs an AI in such a way that you divorce the data from the personal level. Yeah? Just have data. Yeah? Have the data that you need and only the data that you need, and then take my name away from it and just hash that thing up and nobody knows it was me or you or somebody else. Yeah, that's the way I would like to see that discussion going.
Mary, please.
This might be a bit complicated for people like me living with medical devices that are connected, where many data can influence and improve the AI algorithm function, and where my doctor needs to access those data as me, not as neighbor or as a pseudonymized person or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's a huge challenge. Because
I understand, but I tell you what, I mean, if we look at the pandemic now and the creation of the vaccine, I think by just putting the data into buckets rather than having individual clear records would have produced probably the same result. So it is male, okay, fine, and he's old, he hasn't got any hair, so that's fine as well. Yeah, but not my name attached to it.
No.
Yeah, that I think is the fundamental difference regarding to AI. And I'm not opposed myself to give away my data, because I can see that the society can benefit from it. But at the same time, society and the people who take the data have to be very responsible with my data as well. Yeah? So therefore, if we were to take it away and make it anonymous, then everybody is a winner. That's my...
But do you consider that just removing a name and a surname makes medical data totally anonymous? Because each person has his or her personal set, and that's the main issue.
Yes. So you're absolutely right. It's more complex because location plays date and time play a role in there. So it is not as simple as I'm telling it you now. I agree entirely with you, and particularly with health data, and a certain condition coupled with here's a German bloke. There are not that many German blokes in the UK with glasses at that, I don't know, south of Milton Keynes. Yeah. You probably get me, even in a stack of hundreds of thousands of records. Very simply.
Just changing gear a little on this, because it's not just about trying to work out who you are, is it? I mean, if we use the federated learning of cohorts flock from Google, and bearing in mind that Amazon's rejected it, Reddit's rejected it, I can't say it, and the problem is that it can take you to outcomes. This is one of the clips we played earlier, and it can influence and nudge you, and it doesn't matter who you are, right? It's leading you to outcomes. Putting a name to the person is irrelevant. It's still getting you to press this, buy this, vote for this, whatever. That in itself is a huge issue, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree, and I shut up in a minute, but there, the individual has to take responsibility as well. Okay, I as an individual, I'm not forced to click a button or download the latest Fandango app onto my phone because everybody else has it and I want to go to Clubhouse or whatever. Yeah? I don't care. You really have to, as an individual, you really have to think about what you want to do with your data as well. So I'm not taking that away. Yeah. So
we're going to get into a philosophical debate if I keep talking, but this kind of predictability, rationality, you know, and I think people are very much led and influenced without knowing what we're doing. But let me not take us off down that road. Simon, looks like you want to
yeah, I think I'm not entirely sure I agree with the individual responsibility bit. So I think actually and this is a kind of generally accepted legal point in the UK, if you've got a power relationship where you've got one party that has got way more power than another party, then actually the courts have got to help balance that, which is why in an employment tribunal, you know, we've just brought fees in and then we've done away with that because actually for, you know, people need to have that access to justice. I've got a 6-year-old, I've got several children, I've got a 6-year-old, he's getting to that point where, you know, there is probably information being collected about him despite he's got no email address, anything like that, but you know, he's got kids YouTube and things like that. So, you know, he has got no way to navigate that at all. And he's got a father who's a data protection practitioner who really should know better. But you know, if we here get confused by this sort of stuff, what kind of hope does, you know, Joe Blogs on the street really have? I think that's the way we have to keep coming back to it. I also think when it comes to large cohorts of data, it does make an enormous difference for the purpose for which it's used. So when it comes to data trust, and one of the organisations that the task force engaged with was UK Biobank, who oh, is that what you
I did work with them. I had some crazy contracts.
we do some work with them as well at Acrivia, and they collect data consensually from people, and there's some other fantastic research studies like University of Bristol do a study called ALSPAC, which is a longitudinal study as well. Amazing work. And there's some great stuff for data linkages that you can do. But the security that goes into these is fantastic and immense a lot of the time. Wasn't sure if Marie was shaking her head and nodding. But I think, you know, that is different from, say, you know, real-time bidding and more kind of cutthroat commercial interests, where actually I think it is more difficult to advocate any kind of public interest there. But I wouldn't be afraid of this government trying. And when they put public interest in there, I'm a little bit skeptical. Given people's like Ian Duncan Smith's who chairs the report, given his record on voting rights and human rights, it's not great.
But what I liked about the draft data strategy for health was that they wanted to empower public research, and for having worked there and for having seen the mess it was, I really liked it. And I really liked the fact that they said they wanted to provide more transparency and more control for patients on their data and more sharing of the data between the institutions. So in principle, I really like it. The problem is that it's written by the UK government, and I'm not really sure between what is said on paper and looks amazing versus what will be put in practice and how the data will really be used is a different question.
Yeah, I think it comes back to the point we were making earlier about transparency and telling people and making a concerted effort. And I think, you know, one of the things that there are loads of ways that you can do data and use data lawfully and fairly and transparently. And what we see time and time again is that in the UK, we're really bad at doing that fairness and transparency part, and therefore we fail on the lawfulness part as well. I think if we talk to people and engage with them, you know, I can say this now, I'm preaching to the converted, but if we talk about this with people, not just like a small group of representatives representing the whole public, but if we talk to this and sell it to them, probably not the best use of the word, but you know, and get them on board, I think people support it. I think people genuinely support the research. What is slightly weird is that this report goes, oh, well, you know, we could do research, you know, like we've done for COVID. I was like, if we didn't have the GDPR, I was like, we do have the GDPR and you have done the research.
Yes.
But I can tell you it was one of the most painful.
I can imagine. Yeah.
To your point, Simon, I've been thinking about this. You've got kids who are on YouTube who are clicking T's and C's and all sorts of things. They don't know what they're clicking, of course. Now, what's interesting about the "Are you a robot?" button is it's not clicking it that proves you're not a robot. It's the way that you click it and the way that your mouse moves and whatever that proves that you are a human doing it, not a robot. So at the same time, you could work out whether you have a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old moving that mouse or working that tablet, who therefore shouldn't be able to click that button because, of course, they can't read it. They can't even read, let alone read it. And it does put this responsibility back on that, you know, do it properly or don't do it, because otherwise it just looks like it's lined up for corporate interest, doesn't it?
I think here, Richard, is do it properly, number one. But if you don't do it properly, also enforce it. Yeah, and I think that part, the enforcement part, is lagging behind as well. Yeah.
Carsten, are you suggesting that the Information Commissioner is not fully enforcing the law in the way that it could?
Yes, absolutely. Straight on.
Agreed.
Yeah, absolutely.
Are you all looking at this report with some skepticism, or am I being too harsh?
I liked some of the things that was said there, but it was very, like, you know, they didn't go into details. There were some mistakes, and I mean, when they say it's too burdensome for charities and public institutions, I fully agree. I mean, I have seen it.
So do I. Well, yeah, I think we all agree on the good parts. Yeah, but I think what it is behind the good parts is an awful shitload of not so good parts. Yeah,
but what I was a bit disappointed is that it's like they went into a lot of topics, trashing on. I mean, telling the EU was doing badly and showing some great UK examples, but they didn't really go into the details. So it's a bit disappointing on that.
It feels a little bit to me like they've gone, right, you know, it's like you take your car into a mechanic's and, oh, I want to make it faster, and it'll be great, we'll take the brakes out of it. It's like, no, I don't want you to take the brakes out. You know, we need those safety mechanisms there. It's like going to go, right, want to redecorate the house. Okay, we'll burn it down first.
Yeah.
You know, it's not reform, it's deregulation. And because we know the bits that don't work, right? We know the bits where it falls down. I do also think there is an element with data protection law in the UK where there was, when GDPR came in, there was a big, oh, GDPR, this is brand new. And I think there was a kind of good opportunity for people to gloss over the fact that there were things that they should have been doing for the last 20 years that hadn't been doing. It was a great opportunity to kind of frame this as, hey, this is something brand new. And it's not, it's just we haven't been complying with law for 20 years. And, you know, let's just not talk about that.
Yes.
Federico, what are your thoughts on that?
No, I fully agree with Simon, Carsten, and Marie. Of course, there are many things that are not working properly well with the GDPR. The enforcement, even though the ICO enforced and imposed some fines, it is well lagging behind some other DBAs. But many DPAs are facing the same issues. Remember the DPC, the Irish DPC. It is the home of the most of the biggest tech companies, and it imposed only a fine to Twitter of 5,100 euros, which is basically nothing. And the Luxembourgese DPA is not enforcing decision against Amazon. So I do agree with all of you that the ICO is lagging behind, but it is a problem all across all the EU. I think that, I don't know, the Spanish Data Protection Agency is one of the most active on this regard. The Italian, or the CNIL, the French Data Protection Authority, but in general, I think that enforcement is a subject that must be revised in the future.
So blue sky thinking here. What if all the different European data protection authorities would actually come together and say, you take that case, you take that case, I take this case, and they just spread it out? Because, I mean, reality is that each one of them is underfunded and overworked. Yeah. And that is a good reason. that explains at least why we don't see enough there. But if they weren't that parochial and just be more European and share more art, might be better. Now the UK is out of the European Union, so it doesn't apply to the ICO.
Yeah, but the problem the UK will have is that there are more and more harmonization toward GDPR in other countries like China and Japan. So if the UK plays on its own with lighter rules, it will be great for companies in the UK, but when they will want to play out of the UK, it will be a mess because they will have dual standards. Yes,
absolutely. Not a lot of people have actually talked about the representation in the various countries. Mm-hmm. And so when I, as a UK company, provide products and services to individuals in Europe, and I do not have a company in Europe, I should actually have a representative there. Mm-hmm. And the same is true on the reverse side. So a European company that doesn't have a company here in the UK, but offers services and goods to individuals in the UK, should also have a representative here in the UK. Yeah, that is quite clear, very clear, and irrespective of the adequacy agreement or not, that still stands. Yeah.
Simon would like to add something on this.
I was only going to say, I think it's probably one of the most ambitious parts that the GDPR is having those personal representatives. There was a crack. I'll try and find the recording and send it around to Richard. But there's a chap called Tim Turner who does GDPR trading, who is a very, very frank approach to doing data protection. But he did a wonderful trading session on personal representatives. But I think it's probably one of the harder bits to enforce, and can probably fairly low on the ICO's agenda. I think I really like your idea, Carsten, actually, of doing that, kind of distributing the workload across the DPOs. But I guess we'd also need to get to a point where they agree on quite a lot of fundamental issues. And when you've got in the aftermath of Schrems 2, some authorities pretty much immediately, a couple of the German ones, in fact, I was going to say, went, right, we'll cut this off straight away. But of course, because I think Germany has about 18, is that about right?
Yes, yeah, correct, yeah. Bayern has two, yeah, it's quite interesting as well. One for public authorities and one for businesses.
Yeah, which is not dissimilar to the way that Canada does data protection either, in terms of having different things that apply to public and private. Yeah, no, I really like that idea.
Yeah, indeed.
So I saw that there are some questions in the chat, and first one is, we all agree that it's important to have a culture of data minimization, or is not? What are your thoughts on that?
Depends what you mean by minimization, because as I said, I'm a patient. All my medical data and even external non-medical data affect my health. So if minimization is just when I see my doctor, he just looks at my glucose level and the insulin injection I do, it's not worth it, because there are so many other factors that affect my type 1 diabetes that are like the activity, what I eat, stress, hormones, these kind of things that you find are external to the disease, but that influence it.
It's minimum as necessary to the purpose for which is being, we can't divorce the purpose from the data, and that will affect our attitudes in terms of the impact on individuals.
Yeah. If I may, I think there is this, the hoarder next door, the person that doesn't throw anything away. That actually happens with data as well. And when you then have personal data in that mix, it can get actually quite dicey, even for the data controller. And I'm going to exempt the medical for the moment, okay? But if it was just a normal business, why do you want to keep that data? All you can do is lose it, and if you lose it, you have a bigger problem. So get rid, minimize the data, get rid of the storage. It's cheaper as well. Everybody wins. So
I'm not sure they're really trashing the data when they don't need them anymore. I mean, I think they keep them.
Yeah, but for what reason? Because sometime in the future I might need it, and that in itself is not a purpose. Yeah, that is not a purpose. Yeah, and that brings it really, in my view, that brings it back to the AI. If you want to train data, you absolutely can. But again, in my view, do it anonymously. Get as much personal data out of there as you can. Yeah, and you only use the personal data that you need, and only that you need.
But we when we develop algorithms, once we don't need the data anymore, and the algorithm is, we are happy with it, we don't need the data anymore, so we don't keep them. Because we need to develop an algorithm for a specific AI action, so we need to train the algorithm on data, and then we don't need the data anymore. So because the algorithm, we have the code, we know how to write it and how it should work, and how it should react based on similar data, so we can get rid of the data. We need just the how do you call that? The code, like the algorithm itself, not the data that trains the algorithm.
True, okay. But at the same time, then perhaps just do a staged approach and say, okay, I need a limited amount of data in order to write my algorithm, and then train it with data that is then anonymous. Absolutely fine. Yeah. But then also throw it away and put a certification behind it and said, I have thrown it away, and here's a third party that can vouch for my having thrown it away. Please, yeah.
But the opposite is happening, though, isn't it?
Well, I mean, we do this. I mean, you can't change your engine oil these days anymore at home, can you? Yeah. Where do you put the oil? Anyway, down the drain or what? Yeah. So really, the same concepts apply for data lifecycle as well. Yeah.
So my comment there about obviously data collection going up, I put a post in the comments about Facebook going to court to try and keep data, even shadow data, as in, you know, you're around other people's pictures, and even profiles of people who have passed away. So we know they're serious about data. My question, if you don't mind me asking one, is when I first read this, I thought, oh, is this really positive that the government's realized that GDPR was more prevalent when we were just thinking about data and metadata, and that was about it? But now, staying on the theme of Facebook, and those who hear me talk know I'm always on about Oculus Quest 2. It's an incredible piece of kit, but you know, this phone and the IoT devices and the sensors, they're collecting a lot more inference data now, behavioral data. We're kind of living in the dataverse, aren't we, where they're monitoring our gaze and what we're looking at, and if we're flushing, and blood vessels and changes in you know, our eyes and our retinas, and you name it. And there's cameras here looking at you, cameras going out on these headsets. They're tracking flexibility, agility, stamina over time as you use these devices. So is there an opportunity here for us to understand that we need GDPR to be, or whatever we call this, to understand that this is quite difficult data to explain or provide to a customer? Is there an opportunity here, if we just think about the positives, to protect us from this new world of data that's being collected by devices?
It's supposed to, but it's not really put in place. I mean, in practice, Google can still do whatever they want with our data. I mean,
it kind of comes back to that enforceability, doesn't it? And there's an element where our economies are so much based, particularly in the West, are so much based on those sorts of transmissions. You know, actually, is it fair in a democratic society that an independent regulator can just cut off that economic flow, which is what the DPC potentially could? And that opens up some interesting debates in between having a fair and democratic society and an independent regulator with that sort of economic power. Just so, you know, throws a bit more kind of morality into the mix. But no, I think the lack of enforcement is a big factor, because people don't see it making a difference.
No, and you can find Google as much as you want. It won't really make any difference unless they are fined in the 27 EU countries for the same millions or billions amounts. Until that, it won't change anything. They will just pay the fine and that's it.
Alibaba just paid $3 billion. Whatever, right?
Depends on how big your pockets are. And for me, it comes down to trust, right? Do I trust the controller of the data, yes or no? Yeah. It's almost a binary question. Yeah, the answer is binary. Yeah. I either trust or I do not trust. And me being German, I'm usually on the do not trust. Yeah. In fact, we do have, zero trust. Zero trust is a security concept, right?
That's right.
Apply that to everybody, to anybody who wants your personal data. Zero trust. Simple.
So I guess the question that I've been thinking about a lot recently is, how do we, as people who are on the inside, the other side, the people who can communicate, how do we engender trust? How do we communicate effectively and efficiently? And is that the $1 million question?
But I think there is a lot that is based on people understanding what you do. And when I, as a user, receive a 10-page privacy notice that anyway, I have to agree, otherwise I won't be able to use my medical app, and I need my medical app, and Google is given access to the data of my medical app because it's on Android. I mean, I can read it. I have the background, the experience, and the training to read that and to go through that. But basically, I have no choice. And a normal person that is not that has no legal background will not understand a slice of it, any line of it. So it has to be explained in simplified terms. It has to be, people have to understand how it works without getting into thousands of paper and of forms to sign or to consent to, because they have no other choice anyway, especially when they have no choice.
Yeah, and even if you have other choices, you're talking about only one app. In my phone, I have, I don't know, 20, 30 apps. So I can't read every privacy notice, and I can't imagine people having reading every piece of paper. It is impossible. So and yes, it is true. Privacy policy should be shorter, more understandable for everyone. And well, it is also about people working in the industry to advise better to companies to minimize the data collection, try to destroy data that they don't need anymore. So basically complying with Article 5. So nothing more than complying with Article 5, and the management and the handling of data, personal data, would be better for everyone.
Thank you. I saw that we are going out of time, so I give back the word to Richard, and thank you so much to all the speakers. It was a very, very stimulating conversation.
Odilia, thank you so much for moderating. Yeah, that's an hour, just gone like that. That was really fun, really lively. Thank you so much for the debate, the insights. Federico, thank you so much again for setting the scene there at the beginning. That sort of extended intro that you gave was very, very helpful. We're obviously embarking onto what could be days of discussion here, and it's fascinating, and we haven't even got to the kind of conspiracy theories yet. Sorry, but I mean, just look at Facebook and Google's ad revenues in Europe when GDPR came in. You know, emails did that, and ad revenue did that. Wonder what their interest or involvement was in this then to get that sort of increase. So I didn't take us down that road, which is probably a good thing, but very, very helpful. Quick 1-2 line summary from each person, a takeaway for us all to think about from this session. Simon, do you want to go first?
Yeah, just very simply that fundamental rights are there because of the dignity of our shared humanity, despite any flaws and failures that we have, and not because of any citizenship, nationality, creed, or colour. They're there because we're human.
Very good, Marie.
For me, I mean, it's what I came with is I have no problem giving my data for public research and for health purposes, but I need to be sure that they won't be used against me, that there is a minimum need of transparency on what is done with those data.
Okay. Federico?
I am still stick to the principles of data protection. Complying with the principles is only one article, very short, and I think would be better for everyone.
Yes, Carsten.
Don't do what you don't have to be done to yourself. That's what I say. Okay, simple.
Brilliant. Should we do this again in about 8 weeks or something and get the latest updates?
Absolutely.
There's a theme here, I think, or a little program. So thank you so much. I mean, just spending some time with us tonight, hugely, hugely grateful. Thank you, all of you. It means the world.